are all fresh here and we're going live. Just going to actually refresh my screen, and yeah, we are live. So okay, and in the chat I'll also put hello there. Right, and this particular video we're looking at composition over inheritance. So maybe I'll actually publish this, or view publish site. View publish site, let's have a little look. Probably a little bit clearer this way. So I've just called this composition over inheritance, and what we're actually looking at is object-oriented programming, and Python is an object-oriented programming language. And I came across a video that was actually quite interesting. The guy's an excellent coder, and he uses this module tkinter, I think it's called, and he puts tkinter into a class. And generally speaking, when you look at the tkinter documents, they're actually quite poor. As in, if I go to tkinter, I mean, they're poor. They give you their base example that works. So here we go. So we get this example from tkinter import star. They're already telling you to import wildcards. That's like a poor practice. And then they give you some example here. So if we just zoom in a bit, probably zoomed in too much there. But there's no structure to this particular piece of documentation, but there wouldn't be, because it's just a worked example. So, and a lot of users go and they sort of they replicate this, and it's not great practice. And the reason why is it's kind of like if you're doing something big, it's not scalable. So I was like, okay, I'm going to create something, and I started in my particular creations, I started doing something like this. Where was that sheet? Over here, where I'd generate a class, I'd create a class, and then I'll do the normal initialization of the class, so that my class constructor, and then inside it I'll do self.win equals tk.tk, which is creating an instance of this tkinter window. And then you can go ahead and sort of use all of the use a window everywhere within the class. So that's kind of the way of doing it. But then this other person I saw in this video, and I was like, you obviously listen to other people, it's quite interesting. He does it this way, where tk.tk is inside so its inheritance is what it's known as. So it's inherited into my class, and then in order to use all of the methods and attributes, he does this super dot double underscore in it. So and that's Python's way of telling the constructor to use the parent class, so what's been inherited, and then from there the self.title. So we can see here the self.title, and that creates the title of the window. So you create this window, and then you've got a title. And here the difference is on the one below, you've got self.win.title, like that. So one's got an extra dot in there. So one might argue that this is a little bit clearer, and another one might argue, well, this is sort of simpler. So it swings and roundabouts on that thing. So I thought I'll go along and ask a Stack Overflow question on this particular thing. So, and here's my question, which is, I've got these two modules. It's exactly the same as what's on this site over here. The only difference is I'm asking in a public forum, and quite a few people actually answered. This one's really interesting of the answer. So if I zoom in a bit, I've actually got one more reply. Let's just have a look and see if that reply is okay. No, that's different. Okay, so BTW, the main loop. So I didn't need to actually put this main loop piece in. It'd only be worth putting in if there was one of the two functions, not both of them. So but outside of that, let's go on here. Using the first approach. So as for your question, it depends on what you're doing and how much you know about tkinter. And I'm like, okay, well, I know enough about it, but what do you mean? Do I know? I thought I knew what I was doing. Then it says here, using the first approach, it's easier to make bigger widgets by inheriting from tk.frame, but you might actually overwrite a tkinter method without realizing. So that's this over here, and that's quite a great point, which is if I inherit from tkinter and that becomes the actual object. If I do like self.title, like I didn't know that title was necessarily an object. So I might have done self.title equals title and made my own title and sort of like written, not an object, written over the method. So title is a method of tkinter. Whereas here it's actually clear that title here is actually one of the methods is one of the window methods. So we've got this conflicting thing, or at least that's one of the, I guess, advantages of this. It's clearer using the second method. And I don't know what the words or names for them were because I've never come about it. But you can inherit, and then I called it. In fact, here I'm inheriting, and I'm using the super method. That's what I'm actually doing. So I'm calling it inheriting. And over here, I'm not calling it anything. I'm just calling it not using super. So I didn't actually even know what this was. But down here, the second approach is better if you are starting with OOP, object-oriented programming, because it's more intuitive, but sometimes can lead to bad design patterns. I recommend using both and picking your favorite. Now, what does that mean, all of this? Like at the end of it all, I kind of get the first piece, as in I definitely don't want to overwrite methods. But then what is it about a design pattern? And it's not a case that you should use one over the other all the time. Sometimes you're supposed to use one and sometimes you're supposed to use the other. So another person is either is correct. However, personally, I prefer the first method. So this guy here, do is conflicting with this guy over here, the lizard. Let's see what this guy says in the middle. You may be able to find out more how. You may be able to find more help if you know the appropriate terms. This was a really good guy actually. Black Knight. My class demonstrates inheritance, while other classes, which I should actually uptick this, I hardly ever do, which is spelled incorrectly. I actually had a typo on it. I've corrected it in later things. Demonstrates composition. So I'm like, I know what inheritance is. Inheritance is this top one over here. I'm inheriting from TK. This one here is actually called composition. So I didn't know that I was doing composition. That's what I've been doing. And that's historically what I've been doing pretty much my whole life until I learned object-oriented programming and learned about inheritance. But inheritance isn't always the right thing to do. And I'm going to argue in this particular case that inheritance isn't the right thing. Now, the typical examples of where you get inheritance is if you've got, I haven't got my writer up, but if you've got something like dog and cat, they're both animals and they inherit from a parent which might be like animal. So that's an example where you would use inheritance. Now, an example where you wouldn't use inheritance is possibly somewhere like this, where I'm not even inheriting. I just want to use the methods. I want to create this window, and I don't want to extend upon it, if that makes sense. I just want to build using it. And one of the examples, which is quite a nice example, I think, given over here somewhere, or where was it? It was mentioning. I wonder if it's down below. Yeah, here we go. I just looked up the word car. So the question is when do you use each one of them? So to favour composition over inheritance is a design principle that gives us high flexibility. Anyway, when do you want to know this? So if we have a car, for example, an accelerator pedal and a steering wheel share very few common traits, yet both are vital components in the car. So this is an example where we should use composition, where we've got our different pieces and they belong in the same object, but the object is just composed of them. Whereas another example of where we see this quite often, and cars are actually used in fact, if I did go to it, I believe it might be there. Class, I just wonder where it would be. No. Here's a WE3 schools. It'll be in here actually. Do they use it? I think one of the examples is with cars somewhere. But basically, I wanted to find the actual car example because then we can literally classify car versus car. But one of the things that you might do anyway in this example is you can have a car, but then all cars have four wheels. So and all cars have a steering wheel. So there are certain properties that are exactly the same, and then there'll be methods as well. And but you have different types of cars. So you might have a car class and then you want to inherit because, for example, you'd have a Ford or a Mercedes or something else. They're all of the and you might want to extend upon them and they'll have like slightly different properties within them, but for the most part most of the features or a lot of the features are the same. That's a classic example of where you would inherit. And when we like look at the component parts of it, if we wanted to like pull in a component piece of a car, that's the example where we do use composition. So I think I'm going to keep it short and kind of like cut it off at that point. But that's basically composition versus inheritance. And what I've done is, well, I've got these two classes here so we can see them. And this one uses inheritance, this one uses the composition. And I've kind of like put here, this is a little website that I run myself. It's sites.google.com/view Python programming. I might put it in the link. And this is the composition over inheritance. And basically, in simple terms, if the user wants to extend an existing class, if it's something you built yourself, that's where you might want to kind of like extend things. Or if you're working on a bigger project and you take something and you want to improve upon it, like make a version 2.0 of a class that already existed. So you would just inherit from the class and then you would add extra pieces onto it. And that would be a classic example of when you would do that. And the alternatives is when you're just using them. So if a user just wants to use a class, then you should do this thing, which is called composing. In the example above, composing is clearer for the user. So in this particular case, I would do composing rather than inheriting. And that's pretty much it. I'll leave it at that. And yeah, if you like this video, just hit the subscribe, like, follow, and all the rest. If anyone has any comments, but nobody's actually signed up, then this is all live, by the way, so I haven't like pre-planned it or anything. If there's any like errors in it, whatever, tough luck. But yeah, if you found it useful, like, follow, subscribe. If you've got any comments, by all means put the comments in. It'd be interesting to hear because this is the first time and I've literally just looked over composition over inheritance and the like drawbacks and benefits of both of them. So if you've got a better view on it, that would be quite useful. Also, there's this Wikipedia page. I found this page quite useful. Not necessarily so this diagram, but this piece here, which actually the first part of it made it into the website because it's quite logical, which is composition over it. But both of these enable the user to reuse the features of something that's been pre-built. So it's all about behavior and code reuse. And it's, which one do we do? Do we compose? Do we inherit? That's basically it. Ideally, all reuse can be achieved by assembling existing components, but in practice, inheritance is often needed to make new ones. Anyway, that's it. Like, follow, subscribe, put your comments in the comment section, and if there's anything else, just let me know. And I'm going